Hi, folks. This is Steve Behrman, and welcome to the Wake Up Laughing podcast. Well, today's interview is a long story. In fact, it's such a long story, it goes back more than 40 years. I've known today's guest, Jim Courtney, since the 1980s, back when he was looking for someone to help him write his book, which at that time was called How I Took a Bus to $1 Million. Jim will tell you about that, but what I will tell you about Jim is that he's been an owner of not one, not two, but three franchises, real estate franchises. Century 21, um, Coldwell Banker, and his own company, Remerica, which he started his own franchise company. He'll tell you about that as well. He's a man of many talents and many interests that range from poker to comedy to producing movies, and he'll tell you about that too. But I want to begin and talk a little bit about our history and why I'm so excited to be bringing Jim on and his book. I was the guy he hired to help write that book back in the day. And one of the first things, the most important thing that we had in common was we both loved humor. Not only had Jim written a treatment for a sitcom and gone to Hollywood with that. That's a whole other story. He had done stand-up, including at the legendary Comedy Castle in Detroit. But humor is a natural way of being and a tool that Jim has used in a way that's really helped him be more successful in business and really enjoy business more and have the people around him enjoy business more. And as we're going to find out, humor is just one tool in the toolkit. Now, the book didn't happen back in 1985, as Jim will explain, but when he called to ask me 2 years ago if I would help him finish the book we started 40 years ago, I said, of course. Why? Well, because I knew it was going to be fun. And I knew that Jim had some really great stories, key lessons, and practical wisdom to share with all of us. And so now, that book, Smart Luck, An Entrepreneur's Guide to Success and Happiness, is here. And we'll show you a picture of the book. The book is here, and so is Jim Courtney. Welcome, Jim.
Thank you, Steve. I'm glad to be here.
I'm glad to have you. Well, let's start with the simple thing. Let's start with the title of the book, Smart Luck. Smart luck. What do you mean by smart luck? What is smart luck? You have to be born with smart luck, or can anyone cultivate this?
Well, I like to think you can cultivate it, but every business is involved with some luck. And I think that you have to be smart about the businesses that you attempt to go into. And you certainly need luck in all businesses without question. And so hopefully the title of the book will bring people in to read it. It's because anybody can have smart luck.
Well, here's an example. Now again, you're a poker player, right? So this is a lifelong, since you were a kid, a lifelong pursuit and passion and pleasure. Um, how does you tell us more about your poker endeavors and how smart luck plays into poker? Obviously, you have a certain hand that you're dealt, right? And
Well,
then,
yes, you're dealt a certain hand, and you have to understand the players around you. You have to understand the odds of hitting your cards. There's a lot of things that go into playing a poker hand, and they're all different. Everyone is different. Everyone is situational, and that's just the way it is. And you have to be willing to take a risk, and put your money in or not. And you have to decide at that particular juncture if it's a good move. And that requires smart luck.
do you find that, I mean, would you call yourself intuitive let's say as a poker player, I mean, there's a certain kind of instinct. Do you find that there's a certain uh, intuitive aspect to knowing what move to make? How do you, from where does that wisdom or that distinction come for you?
Well, it comes from watching everybody player at the table and your position on this particular hand and the odds of you hitting your card and how many cards you can hit to make the what's called the nuts. Um, there's a lot of things that go into it. And I can only say this, that if you want to get good at poker, play.
And that's probably true about anything, probably true about any
Almost.
endeavor, any
Yeah,
endeavor.
absolutely. Absolutely.
You know, I love the title of the introduction to the book. I had every advantage of being disadvantaged, right? So,
Yeah, and I
uh,
did.
eh, tell me more about the advantages of your particular disadvantages, what they were, and how maybe they shaped how you end up cultivating your smart luck in your life.
Well, when my father went bankrupt, as an example, um, I looked at that as a glitch um, in the road, and it ha can happen to anybody, and it happened to my dad in '58 when the recession hit, and so it wasn't his doing, but it was the doing of the economy, and so therefore I couldn't blame him, and I didn't. I looked at it as being a lesson that I had to learn that there's an opportunity to go bust and you don't want it. So you have to look for smart luck.
So, would you say that as there's a story. In fact, it might even be a picture somewhere. A story of you basically sitting out there on the street with your furniture while your dad's at work and your mom's not available, and you're sitting there with a friend with your things out on the street for all of the neighbors to have a look at. Um,
Yeah, I never forgot that day ever. And I sat out there um, so everyone could see me, and I understood that they were looking at me and closing their curtains when I would look at them. But
yeah.
it was just one of those things that I had to survive and go through, and it was tough at the time, but I think I learned a lot from it actually. So and my dad suggested I try real estate. Thank God. I thank him. I don't blame him. I thank him for everything because he suggested I try real estate, and I just it was wonderful that he suggested that.
And looking, I mean, I've had a chance to look at your life because I've been, helped you write about it. And the other thing that struck me is that, people respond to situations in different ways. And clearly, you had a resilient response, just as when you were a kid, as your parents are about to migrate from Canada to the US, you ended up falling out of a tree and breaking your leg. Now,
Yeah.
how did that end up? How did you reframe that in a positive way and make a change in your life that maybe you're still enjoying the change you made?
I don't know, but what it caused me to do was I set up you remember the Mr. Peanut?
Of course, Mr. Peanut, the little character, yeah.
So I had a Mr. Peanut bank, and I set it on the dresser in the hospital room where I was, and I put a note on it, donations for Jimmy Courtney's broken leg. And I collected enough money to buy my grandparents, both my grandmothers and my mother, a gift at Christmas time. So it was a wonderful opportunity. But I laid in bed for 3 months in traction because they operated on me 3 or 4 times, and I had a plate and three screws put in my leg. So I guess I understood sales um, from a very early age and that you can sell anything, anytime to anybody if you react the correct way. And so that's what I've tried to do in my life is react the correct way and cause sales to happen.
Now you had many in your first couple of years out there in the workaday world. I think what is it, like 25 different gigs you had, 25 different oh, too hot, oh, too cold, oh, all that
Yeah,
not
I
quite
worked
right
at
situations.
yeah, I worked at Ford once for 2 days, two 9-hour shifts, and God bless anybody who does that. But I went back the second day because I didn't think it was as bad as I thought it was the first day, and it was worse. So so I left there in a hurry. Anyway, I want to go back real quick
Yeah,
to you and I meeting.
yeah.
I called you to write a book for me because I lost $100,000 out in Las Vegas, and I wanted to get it back. And it wasn't going to change my lifestyle, but I wanted to earn it back. And I tried to figure out how to get it back. And the quickest way for me was to write a book called I Took a Bus to $1 Million because I had bought into the real estate business with my partners and I found Century 21 growing and we bought the rights and we sold them back to the company. And I made a little over $1 million. So I thought, well, I'll write this book. You and I wrote 5 chapters. We shipped it out to a bunch of publishers, and they all came back with the same answer. We don't want an I did book. We want a how to book. So 40 years later, I called you and I said, look, I've done a whole lot more. Let's write the end of the book. And you agreed, and here it is. And I am so happy. I am very pleased with what you've done. And you transferred all my tapes onto print, and it looks wonderful. So thank you.
What's really funny is that um, in the process of writing this book, I assumed that all of the stuff that we had worked on back there in 1985 or whenever it was lost. And I was going through storage, and there it was. I found a box of old stuff from the 1980s, and there was everything that we had written, all of the chapters. And what was funny is that I told you a story that I remembered, and you go, I don't remember that story. And there it was in there, that we wrote it. It was a story about when one of your partners went bankrupt and you lost, I think at that point, $90,000. And I think this is the key. I think the people watching this are going to understand, are going to get something from this because there's a certain way. You don't take things poisonally.
No, I don't.
No, you don't. In other words, your dad went bankrupt. There are people in this world who would make that a lifetime script. Look, something happened to me when I was 15 years old. My life was ruined, and that was it. Or falling out of a tree. You fell out of a tree, you couldn't play sports. What did you do? Oh, you learned how to play cards. A lifelong, a lifelong pursuit.
Yep.
So, I think that part of this has to do with resilience, and that's in not taking that poisonally. You took it as a challenge. Okay, well, um, when you lost when your partner went bankrupt, and by the way, you did the very same thing when you lost the money in Las Vegas. You went into the bathroom and you looked in the mirror and you went ha 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 ha, and you did that until you actually physically began laughing for real.
Yes, absolutely. I've done that many times.
I've taught many people that ever since you told me that story in 1985, and I
Yep.
teach my classes on humor. I tell the story about Jim Courtney losing money, walking into the bathroom, and then I think you told me that you went and after that you took Linda out to dinner.
Yeah, I'm sure I did.
Yeah, and so what happens, what the lesson is for me is that one of the lessons in the book, and I love the way this is phrased, is that um, you know learning how to lose right is a winning trait.
Yes, it is. You can lose correctly or you can lose wrongly. And I like to win, you lose correctly.
Yeah. Yeah, and of course, and now the other thing, and this is another quality that I think is key that came out in the book, and in these times when people are feeling much more isolated from each other and much more disconnected and competitive, your slogan is, "I believe everybody should win except in poker." So
Bingo.
it's everybody wins. So tell me how did the win-win um, notion and strategy, how did that come to you? Was it something that was natural? Was it any mentors that you had or anything like that?
You know, I'm not sure, but I think it was the mentors I had. Um, I believe that I've just always felt, as an example, I had a business, and I won't say what one it was because it's irrelevant now, but I was in a business with two other people, and one of the people decided to retire and move out of state. And so we bought him out. And in buying him out, I ended up as the biggest stockholder in the company. And I thought I could maintain that, but I didn't want to. I gave my other partner enough shares that we became equal partners. And I think that that was the best thing I ever did because he was going to be running the company. And I think it was important to make sure he knew that he had some say, as well as my secretary now, Marilyn. She's been with me for 45 years. She started with me in 1980. I made her a partner because I wanted her to A, stay, and B, make something if we do well. And so I've kind of just always been that way. You know, I want everybody to win. I want it to be a win-win situation. I don't want to be I win, you lose. I don't want it to be you win, I lose. I want it to be win-win. And I believe also that you should have partners in everything you do because if you do something alone, you think everything you do is correct, and it isn't. It's impossible to be right all the time. You need someone to say to you, "Hey, Jim, did you look at it like this?" So I've always wanted partners in everything I've ever done, and I have them. I don't own anything alone. Well, I do own one business a building alone, but that's because my partner died. So, other than that, I have partners in everything.
I love the story, your development story, where you find yourself in a bidding war against somebody else that you've never met, and the
Yes.
price is going up and up and up, and you
Yep.
go, "Let me meet this guy."
Let
So,
me
so
meet
what?
them. I want to
So what
meet them.
happened?
Yeah.
So what happened?
So we became partners and we bought it together, and we've been partners for 40 years. We've developed 9 subdivisions together, and we've done very well. Thank God I met him.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. But there was something in you that went, "Huh, I wonder who this guy is. He might be a pretty smart guy.
Yeah.
Maybe we do better together." I mean, this
Yeah.
is, again, this is why I love this book, and I think a lot of people will love the book because it's playfully written. It's designed for, one of the taglines we have is how someone no one has heard of created unheard of success. And you're not like a super celebrity. You don't have a garage full of Bentleys,
No,
uh,
I don't.
or like some baseball player I just read about. You don't have a hundred pairs of sneakers. You don't have that.
I think I'm just an average guy, and I want to stay that way. I want to be an average person who takes care of other people. That's all. I've tried to mentor people, and I think I have. In fact, I don't know if I should tell you this one, but I had one of my past brokers called me a couple of 3 weeks ago, and he said, "I want to thank you." And I said, why? He said, I'm a millionaire because of you. He said, I listened to everything you said and I did it, and now I'm a millionaire. So thank you. And I took that as a compliment. That was very nice.
What a gift. What a gift to be
Yeah.
given back. Now you
Yes, it
had your,
was.
this is, was he one of the Brat Pack people? Uh,
Well, he was close to them. He was right behind them. I met him. Interesting quick story. I was playing poker at a restaurant in Detroit, and I played. A friend of mine owned the restaurant, and we used to play in the back room. And one day I was out there eating lunch, and the waitress came and waited on me, and she introduced herself, and she remembered me from high school, and we went to high school together. And I said to her, "Hi, how are you?" Blah blah blah, and we talked, and I said, "How many children?" And so told me, blah blah blah, and what's your son do? Uh, and he, so anyway, to make a long story short, I said, "Why don't you have your son call me, and I'll break him into the real estate business." And that's the guy who called me and thanked me.
yeah.
It's a wonderful story.
That really is true. Because again, um, and your sons are in the business, and one of
Yes,
your girls is in real estate as well.
yes,
It's really these days to have kind of a family legacy business that
yeah.
actually endures over time, where you're able to pass it on and pass it down, and kind of like teaching your kids how to drive. This is a, it's, you're actually mentoring your own children.
I hope so. Both my sons have done well, and they continue to do well. And they own the majority of the office I'm in, and I own a piece of it, of course.
As
Um,
you,
but but they are the partners, the main partners, and I'm glad for them. They're doing very well.
See, what you don't know is that I've taken Jim Courtney with me over the 40-year career I've had as Swami Beyondananda and teaching other people humor. And I've often used your saying, I'd rather have a tenth of a watermelon than a whole grape.
Then a whole grape. Exactly correct.
And that's really, again, that idea of taking partners on, of making a team endeavor. Now, part of you got to have the right attitude and mentality and perspective to be a team member and a team leader. And I know I've seen in your stories in the book that you've learned from the best of them and you've learned from the worst of them.
Oh, absolutely. You got to learn from the bad as well as the good. I've had partnerships that didn't go the way I wanted them to, but it certainly wasn't because of me. But can say that I got out of those, and life goes on, and you move on. Um, you make mistakes along the way, but life goes on. One of my favorite sayings, Steve, and I thought about it a second ago when you said something, is that there's only two people that make money: the federal government and counterfeiters. The rest of us get money as a byproduct of what we do. So do it well, and money will fall on you, and you can't stop it.
That's a great mantra. That's a great
Yep.
mantra because often we get pulled into endeavors that are not ours to do and we feel like I got to do this to make a living. And then you end up in this downward spiral of I don't like what I'm doing. And guess what? That's what gets broadcast to the world.
Yep.
So
Yeah.
you
Sad.
obviously like what you're doing, and that's what gets broadcast. So let's
I have loved what I've done.
let's
I've
talk
tried
about
lots of things.
let's talk about
Let's talk.
humor. Let's talk about
Go
humor
ahead.
because this is one of the first things that we had in common. That when I first met you, and we started talking about this book, it struck me that you are one of these people, and I've been, comedy's been my main field for 40 years. You have kind of perfect pitch when it comes to comedy. You know what's funny, you know when to use it, you know when to not use it, and it's a very, I call it a people tenderizer. Um, it facilitates relationships. It makes you memorable. How did you cultivate the sense of humor?
It was ironic what happened. I went to a open mic night at a bar in on Pontiac Trail in Orchard Lake, called the Meeting Place, I think. And the comedy was in the lower level, and it was run by a guy named Mark Ridley. And so I went there that night with a friend of mine, and we were sitting there listening to the comics, and all of a sudden Mark said, "Would anyone like to get up and tell a few jokes?" And then he walked around the room, and he came by and my buddy said, "Hey, he'd like to get up," pointing to me. And so Mark said, "Would you like to get up and tell a couple of jokes?" And I said, "Well, let me think about it and let me write a couple." So he gave me a few minutes and I wrote a couple and I got up and I did a few minutes. And I guess I did all right because about a week later, Mark called me because he had my number and he said, "Are you coming back?" And I said, "I don't know why." And he said, "I've had a few people ask me about you. They liked you." So I went back and I did a few more sessions. And I enjoyed doing it. And I worked around town at different clubs. And the problem with comedy, as you know, is you have to be willing to travel. And I wasn't. I was in a new relationship. I was getting married. Um, I had a couple of sons. I didn't want to travel. So I stopped doing it. So I did it for about 2 years. So then I would go to Mark's place and see the comics, and he kept moving. And I said to him one day, I said, "Why do you keep moving around?" And he said, "Well, every time I get into a bar and I get going, the bar owners all think that they don't need me, that they can get the comics and do the same thing I'm doing. But the comics stayed with me." And so I said, "Well, why don't you buy your own place?" And he said, "I don't have any money." So I gave him $10,000 cash. Cash. I did it specifically because of I wanted to give him cash. So I gave him $10,000 cash at lunch and I said, "Here's your seed money. Now go raise the rest and open your own place." We were partners for 25 years. So he was a wonderful guy and he still is.
Yeah, yeah, and what people may or may not know is that Mark Ridley's Comedy Castle in Detroit, even though there may be like the Comedy Store fairly well known in LA and all
Well,
that,
actually it's in Royal Oak
yeah,
and
in
it's the
Royal Oak,
number
yeah.
one club in Michigan and number six in the nation based on the comics.
And when I spoke to Mark and we talked about you know that incident and how that happened and how things unfolded, I found out that the model that he used, the model that most comedy clubs now use, usually like the three comics, an MC, an opener, a middle guy, and then the headliner, and all of that. That formatting was developed right there at the Comedy Castle in Royal Oak. So
Yeah, he did a wonderful job.
and so he set a standard. Now I want to talk about another standard before we get to some more funny stuff. Um, I remember we were talking back when you'd sold your Century 21 franchises, and there was I think there was a non-compete for a period of time, and you were launching your own Remerica. And I said, well, okay, so what's the difference between Century 21 and Remerica? And I'll repeat what you told me at the time and correct me if I'm wrong. And you said, well, Century 21 basically, sets up these, these offices, and then every month they take money from the offices. And your frame is that how can I support these people in being successful in their business? So yes, of course, they paid for the franchise, but you created a cutoff, didn't you? That after
Yes.
a certain, tell us more about that because that was a pioneer in that industry, if you will.
Well, what I did was I capped, because I used to do this with my agents. I capped the franchise fees. In other words, I said to my brokers, I'm going to not put you in the franchise business. I'm not going to sell you a franchise. I'm going to put you in the franchise business with me. So had an opportunity to make more money than I did because I capped their franchise fees. And so they could make, hypothetically, if I capped it at 30 grand, they could make everything. And that's what my cap was at the beginning. I capped it at 30,000. So if they made franchise fees of 80,000, they made 50. I only made 30. So I put them in the franchise business with me, and that's what made me successful.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, if you have a number of people who are doing it's again, that's the old tenth of a watermelon, rather than kind of grabbing the whole grape and
Bingo.
squeezing it to the point where you have people who feel like they're being exploited. I saw this as rather than extracting, you were supporting. That you were
Yes.
supporting them in business and you were being paid a certain stipend for all the support that you were given. And at the end of 30,000, what it was at that point, at the end of 30,000, you were satisfied to put a cap on it and let them make even more.
Yes.
Um, and I think that one of the hardest things for people who are mentoring other people who are working with younger people is what happens when those people become more successful than I am, right? So for you, bless them.
Yeah. God bless them.
And
I
you
want
got
them
your,
to be successful.
yep.
That was the key.
So let's talk a little bit more about humor. I know that you've used it as a regular as simply how you are. It's like how you are. It's not even about being the guy with the lampshade on the head. Not that humor, but just using it as a way to create friendliness, as a way to create companionship.
Yeah. I wish I could tell you what I have done or what I do. I just, I don't know. It's just me. I just react the way I react.
Have you ever been in a situation where either you used humor and went, uh-oh, that didn't work, or you stopped yourself just in time?
I'm sure I have. I don't remember those instances, but I'm sure that's absolutely positive. Both of them, absolutely positive, possible. So I don't remember, but I'm sure I've been there in both sides of that coin.
So yes, and let me see. There's probably one more thing that I think is important to talk about because it's something that involves you and me, uh, and that is, the you are one of the people. You're one of the few people in the world that who can brag that nothing is responsible for your greatest financial success. So
Bingo.
tell us that
Absolutely,
story.
without question. I'll tell you that story real quick. So when I met Steve, he came to me with an idea after we were done with the book, and he said, I have this idea for nothing. And I said, what's that? And he said, well, it's a box and it has jokes on the outside, but it has absolutely nothing in it. So it was like the pet rock of its time. And he said, would you like to invest? And I said, maybe. And he invited two guys to the table, um, Bill Taylor and um, Josh Kempner, and they came to the table and they had a company called Color Book, and they could make the product. And so I liked them and I thought they were good guys. And I certainly like Steve. And so I invested and we came up with absolutely nothing and absolutely nothing sold. It didn't knock the socks off the world like we wanted it to, but in fact, it did sell. But in meeting Bill Taylor and Joshua Kempner, they had a company called Color Book, as I said, and they were looking for investors. So I invested $2,500 I bought 25% of the company. And with Howard Diamond, another a professor at U of M, and he bought 25% of the company. So Josh and Bill had 50% of the company. So we bought into the company and they kept going, and I believed in them and what they did. And sure enough, Howard decided to sell out and he retired. And so he sold out. I, on the other hand, held on to my stock. At one time, I ended up with 32%, I think, when Howard left. And I ended up with 8 or 9% when the smoke cleared and they finally sold it. And they sold it to a company called Jack's Pacific out in LA. I made almost $4 million on that particular deal. And so it was the most wonderful thing that ever happened to me. And
Smart
so I
luck,
think,
huh?
yeah, that was smart luck. And I want to thank you, Steve, for that. And so I owed it to you to call you back when it was time to write the book. And that's certainly one of the stories in the book because it's so true. And it just happened to me, and I got very lucky. So thank you.
Yeah, yeah, and again, I think it's partly that instinct, and partly not, the other aspect of not taking things poisonally is a sense of equanimity and balance that, you know, you are never grabby or greedy about any of
No,
these things.
I never have been.
Yeah, you just let it be, and kept doing the service that you've been doing.
Yeah.
So to kind of wrap this up, I mean, first of all, I want to highly recommend Smart Luck, not just because I had a hand in writing it, but because I had a hand in reading it, and in the simple common sense lessons that get overlooked in all of the flash. Right now, you're not one of those people out there doing seminars and being a thought leader and trying to build a big platform. And you want to share the value that you got, and just as surely as taking joy in the success of somebody you mentored who called you to say thank you for making me a millionaire, taking my mother's advice and that chance meeting. So I think that there's other people like that out there who you've influenced. If you had to say, there's a young person watching this, right? And times are certainly different than they were 60 years ago when you were just starting out. The world's a very different place. Right now we're at a point where I think it's something like 40% of people in this country could not qualify to buy a home. Where children, where the next, two generations are we're at a point where they're expecting that they won't be able to have the lifestyle that their parents did. So you have somebody in front of you who is a younger person who has an entrepreneurial spirit. They want to be one of those people who creates unheard of success, even if nobody knows who they are. They want to be like the millionaire next door, who leads a balanced life. What would you tell them? What advice would you give them in starting out in a business, in developing their entrepreneurial chops?
Well, what I would say first is find something that you like to do and then do it. Everybody can do well if they find something they love to do and they do it. Don't settle for something less than what you like. If you like doing it, it's not a job, it's not work, it's fun. And I want to have fun all the time. So I'm always looking for something that I want to do, that I like to do. And that's what I think that would be the advice that I would give anybody starting out is find something you like to do and then just do it. Do it, man.
And see, you've done that in so many different fields. The original title we were toying with at the beginning was My $1 Million Life.
Yeah.
And it reminds me of that joke, right? The joke of the billionaire comes down for breakfast. He tells his wife, I feel like $1 million. She says, what's wrong? So I guess the figures are different, but the $1 Million Life really has to do with having a life that's enjoyable and that's bringing
Exactly.
that to other people and allowing yourself to try to, we haven't talked about it, but you produced movies and you really helped establish a film industry in Detroit when Detroit really needed it. You helped own a theater in Plymouth, Michigan, ran that for a
Yeah.
period of time with a couple of
Yeah.
other partners. And having interviewed many of these people for the book, all your old partners still like you. So,
Thank God.
so I think that's really that's really a great thing.
One of them called me today after 40 years. He said, "Let's get together and have dinner. I want to go out and have dinner." Okay.
Well, there you have it. So that, my friends, is $1 Million Life.
Yep,
That it's not
exactly
just
correct.
about money. It's
It's
about
not about
everything
money.
else. Yeah.
It's about everything. Money's a byproduct of what you do. So do it well. That's all.
Well, good. Well, speaking of byproducts, I hope people buy this product and
Yes, I do as well.
fully enjoy the Smart Luck book. We'll put it up on the screen
I
before
hope
we
they
end the
get
call.
something out of it. That's all I want is for them to get something out of it, anything at all. It's
Very
good.
good. Thank you so much, Jim Courtney.
Thank
I'm
you.
so excited about this book being out there. And I think that the one thing about this book is when people begin to read it, they will not be able to stop.
Yeah, that's why and that's one of the reasons I wrote a lightly paged book. It's only 158 pages. You can put it down. You won't put it down. You'll read it in one night. So,
Exactly. Okay,
yeah.
Jim, a pleasure
Thanks,
talking
Steve.
with you. Thank you, folks. This is Steve Behrman and Wake Up Laughing. We'll see you soon.